Well, welcome everybody. We're going to get started, and we're, first of all, want to recognize that we are on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. And as we continue our process as a nation for truth and reconciliation, it is our honor to be here to hear from Grand Chief North Wilson, and you will have 10 minutes to present. And I want to welcome Sheila North Wilson and David Chadwick, who are going to be presenting on behalf of MKO. And you have 10 minutes, and then we'll do a series of questions. Thank you for coming. So I'll turn the floor over to you to begin whenever you're ready.
Sure. Thank you very much. Ninaskmana Denonis Atimwan. But Bonnaby Cree Nation, Gitukimakan, Manitoba, Kiwi Tanawa, Yokimakanak, Biadzamustadaguk, Animitago, Animitano Haskoiha, Distainanan, and Dininiminana Ganamitatic. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Sheila North Wilson from the Bonnaby Cree Nation. And an elder told me once that when we use our mother tongue first in public spaces, we are practicing our sovereignty. So I do that out of respect for my sovereignty and for my people, and not out of disrespect for yours. I'm thankful to be here, and I also want to preface what I'm going to say with this just being a minor part of the big problem around this topic. I don't profess to know everything about it, and I don't think anyone really does. But I'll give you some perspectives from what we know from our region, and thankful for our 30 chiefs and communities that I represent, and of course our staff, including Dave Chadwick and others who help us along the way. Tanse Bonjour et Datle, good morning. On behalf of the 30 Northern Manitoba First Nations representing nearly 2/3 of the province and the over 72,000 First Nation citizens of Manitoba, Kiwetinawi, Okimakanak, which are Cree, Dene, and Ojibwe Cree. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to make this brief presentation regarding the default prevention and management policy of INAC. As you are no doubt aware, it was brought in under the previous federal government. I think that this review is timely and in fact overdue. I don't believe that there are many MPs or even senators who would say that this policy has led to greater economic development on reserves. When it was brought to the federal government, had embarked on massive cuts in funding to core and operational funding for First Nations organizations and tribal councils across Canada. On June 3rd of that year, all First Nations organizations were sent letters, AANDC, outlining reduction in project funding cuts that would take place in 2013 and 2014. And I might add, those letters came in after 5 p.m. that day. So it was very underhanded. Core funding reduced by 10%, and regional organizations funding reduced to a maximum of $500,000. Project funding was reduced over a 2-year period. First Nations organizations on average lost over 50% of their funding for Manitoba. It was 68% according to one report for Manitoba that I recently read, and I heard that it was one of the bigger cuts across Canada was in Manitoba. Over a period of 5 years, the same federal department underspent its budget by almost $1 billion. It was underspending its annual budget by $218 million on average during the last few years of the former federal government. This was during a period when the public was challenging the federal government to address the unsafe water crisis on literally hundreds of reserves. Long overdue basic infrastructure were stalled, and another generation was denied equal educational funding because of their race and geographical location. The then Prime Minister had officially apologized for the damages caused by residential schools, but was unwilling to act to address the inequities that Indigenous people endured and still endure. Instead, programs addressing our concerns were subject to funding reductions greater than almost all other departments. The default prevention and management policy fits into that agenda as it succeeded in reducing economic development and self-government. I want to begin by noting that over half of our MKO First Nations are under INAC management control. The default prevention and management policy, which came into effect in 2011, was revised in 2013 and is supposed to support community capacity development so that communities continue to increase their ability to self-manage and to prevent default and default recurrence. In fact, this means that the power and options of the local chief and council were very limited at best. Many Manitoba First Nations have been under these type of restrictions for decades under different names, including the Indian Agent. This means that for all of the most important decisions in their communities, they've had to contact INAC Winnipeg or Ottawa should the federally approved actual manager decide not to approve their recommendation. The most recent statistics on INAC website list 7 of our First Nations who have been placed under the category of recipient managed management action plan. The euphemism officially means that the First Nations develop a plan acceptable to INAC. The next 2 categories, recipient appointed advisor management, co-management, and the third-party funding agreement management, are stages more tightly controlled by the department. 12 of our First Nations are under these categories. In total, 46 nations in Manitoba are under the default management category, one of the highest in this country. Officially, this policy is supposed to focus on prevention, management, and sustainability, but more often it is a constraint on developing sustainable communities. While this policy of the previous federal government remains, so also does the most outstanding infrastructure shortfalls of the previous government. There is no shortage of potential infrastructure projects needed on reserves across this country. Most of them have been identified for years. It is not news that this committee and the federal government analysis indicated last year that it would take $2 billion to deal with mold and housing shortages on our reserves in northern Manitoba alone, while the housing budget for the entire country in the last budget was less than 1/10 of that. Estimates of the infrastructure deficit on First Nations in this country are in excess of $7 billion. Without getting into the details of what is needed at each community that MKO represents, I want to simply point out that these deplorable conditions force First Nations leaders into a series of crisis situations. Band officials are daily called on to deal with desperate calls for help from families struggling to survive in dire poverty. They and the band are constantly falling behind trying to deal with all these pressures. We are pleased that the federal government has formally endorsed the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but I think if we are truly going to implement change, we need to examine the factors that keep our people down. A week ago, I spoke at the United Nations on the similarities and differences of refugee immigrants coming to Canada from elsewhere and Indigenous people coming to urban settings from remote reserves. Both groups find coming to Canada in urban centres a major challenge. The different cultures, languages, infrastructure, employment opportunities, and frankly often overt racism are difficult to overcome. Fortunately for most refugees, there is a lot of support to assist them. Often that is not enough, but the comparison to Indigenous immigrants to cities is very telling. Without high schools, let alone post-secondary institutions on most of our reserves, many of us are forced to go to cities following elementary school. As I can attest personally, having come from a remote fly-in reserve for high school, it is a huge challenge and frequently a dangerous one for young women and girls. Without any support and no understanding of the threats and dangers that are there, I came close to disaster more than once when I left home at 15 to go to high school in Winnipeg. Our reserve, like most reserves, had no resources to assist me or others. The facts are that most First Nations living under default prevention and management have no real power to influence in deciding band priorities. As Senator Murray Sinclair said last night, progress on implementing the TRC calls to action have been quite limited after 20 months. For First Nations under default prevention and management, these changes are virtually impossible to see. The statistics of despair have not changed. If we're going to address reconciliation seriously in this country, I suggest taking away the strings that control many reserves would be a good place to start. First Nations people were sufficient for thousands of years before colonization and the creation of the Indian Act and the relocation to small reserves. The default management policies of INAC reinforce this control by preventing the development of self-government in our First Nations. When we look at the future of my province and much of the country, it is increasingly understood that the greater participation of Indigenous people in this economy is critical to the future economic prosperity. To successfully ensure that Indigenous advancement in the workplace will take major investments on and off reserve. The payoffs for the economy will be in the billions of dollars. Having First Nations in charge of their own communities is a tangible first step in the economic development of First Nations communities. Despite good intentions, much of the proposed infrastructure spending committed in the current fiscal year for development on reserve has not been spent. One of the reasons for this is the continued inability of First Nation governments to plan and work with the private and public sector because they do not have the power to do so. Projects get delayed, and in the case of our fly-in communities, these postponements can be a year or longer. And as Cindy Blackstock has so eloquently put it, children only have one life. We cannot endlessly delay action waiting for incremental change. The trauma occurring on reserves must stop. Continuing to promote the same failed policies and expecting new results makes no sense. Instead, let's practice true reconciliation and acknowledge that controlling local government from Ottawa is not improving conditions on reserves. It is time that we help develop local government excellence, not just continued the industry of outsiders overseeing all decisions and focusing on past overruns caused by inadequate financing. Tomorrow, the federal government releases its budget for 2017 and 2018. As much as I want to see commitments to address the many economic challenges, I would also like to see major commitment to take off the chains of controlling so many of our First Nations. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you so much. Now we move into the question period, and the first round of questions goes to MP Michael McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Grand Chief. You've raised several issues that I've raised around this table on different occasions, and there is some real concern, I think, right across the country in our Aboriginal communities and reserves, and the level of support that's being provided to enable our communities to become healthy and functional. I think, as you indicated, the cuts that were made by the previous government is probably the number one cause of where our communities are today. I have communities that have indicated to me that they've been reduced by up to 40–50% of their budget, and they're at the point of becoming dysfunctional because there was not enough money invested in core funding as it was, and to reduce it by 40% leaves no room for capacity. And most communities are just able to keep the lights on and the heat on, and that's about it. And there's really no management. And we also don't have, INAC doesn't spend any money in training in the communities that I've seen. We have people that are coming in to manage band councils that virtually don't have any experience. Because we have no capacity locally, I see people that just come into the community, sometimes just wandering through, and end up getting hired to be the manager with no experience. And through my own experience, I've recognized that the communities that do the best have people that are local, that are locally trained, and they have homes there. They don't plan to go anywhere. So I wanted to try to get some indication of what would your priority recommendations would be. And I want you to maybe expand a little more on the core funding issue.
You're right. I think you know the situation more than a lot of people might, because we start off on a deficit and a negative when we start talking about the core financing in our First Nations. So it's not a surprise that some First Nations and managers get accused of mismanagement, because they're forced to, for example, how are you supposed to predict how many funerals you're supposed to cover for the year? And in the budget at the beginning of the year, there's maybe 10,000 for funerals, and you have maybe a rash of suicides or poor health conditions, and the chief and council are forced to move money over to cover a lot of these expenses that our people don't have the means to pay for a coffin and pay for funeral costs. So that's just one area that is always often overlooked when you talk about budgets, and roads is another one. In one of our communities, I think they get $50,000 a year to maintain their roads, and it costs $1 million to do that in actual numbers. And how are they supposed to account for that? And when they do, they're considered mismanaging the funds. So this government and the policies and the Indian Act and everything that all the policies are negatively impacting our people to a point that it's crippling our First Nations. There are many good ideas in our communities that our people know how to run their own communities and run their own affairs, but the way that it's set up right now is not allowing that, and we need to change these policies. And I think the biggest and most obvious recommendation is that we need to honor these treaties and start giving the right amount that our communities need to function. And that's based on treaties. It's not based on a handout, because this is supposed to be money and resources that we are supposed to share as a people together in this country, not as a handout to our First Nations, because often that's how it's characterized in the public and in the media, that we're asking for handout, but that's not right. We have as much right to the resources and the profits of the resources from our communities and our regions as anyone else does. In northern Manitoba, 80% of the energy that comes to Manitoba Hydro in Manitoba comes from our north, in my region, and we benefit the least. We still have the highest rates of energy bills in our province, and we have the most poorest communities in our province, and yet 80% of that energy that the government of Manitoba sells to other places and uses comes from our region.
Okay. I just want to ask one more question on funding. The last budget had $8.4 billion for Aboriginal funding. And I know that money does not include the North. So $8.4 billion is for the southern communities. We don't get any of that money. The money that was announced doesn't come to us. We haven't seen any. I'm probably the only MP that lives in a small Aboriginal community, and we haven't seen a house built in I don't know how many years. So the money is all going south. So have you seen a difference with this new budget announcement? Has it made a difference in terms of funding for the communities that are in your area? Because I see you have almost 60% of the communities that you represent, or the First Nations you represent, are in a third-party management situation.
Sir, about 30 seconds.
In terms of infrastructure, no. In other areas, perhaps, like mental health, there is some investment, although it'll never be enough. But infrastructure, I don't see it. I hear that there's promises for housing coming, but yet, again, we don't know, because the winter road season is already short. A First Nation just called me yesterday saying that the road is closed and they have 20 more loads to take home tonight, but the road is closed. So if the roads don't reopen for this emergency supply, they won't get their lagoon built. So, we're also subject to the weather, and that also has to do with all the decisions down here on climate change.
Thank you. Questioning now moves to MP Arnold Verison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guests for being here today. My line of questioning will be more in line with the third-party management issue that we're studying here. How many of the First Nations in Manitoba are under third-party management right now?
46. 46. in
46. And do you have an anecdotal story about why one of them is under third-party management?
There's probably different reasons for it, but
Yeah. Do you have an example for
well,
that?
I did sort of allude to it earlier that we're starting off on a negative balance anyway, and that when they're trying to manage the little that they have to cover all the needs from the small amount of resources they have, they end up looking like they're mismanaging, but really they're trying to do the best they can with the few resources they do have to cover the high needs in the community.
You don't have a particular case that you could explain to us how they end up in third-party management?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I don't think it would be fair to any of the communities on that.
Okay, yeah, because like I have 14 First Nations in my riding, and 3 of them are under third-party management, and there's a lot of anecdotal stories about the one I think has gone bankrupt 3 times, so to speak, and that would lay into what you're saying is that there just isn't enough money.
There just isn't. There just really isn't. And it's usually the young people that suffer the most and the sick people at the end of the day.
One of the First Nations that I recently visited, they have a trust account for the resource development that happens in the area. It goes into a trust account, and there's $200 million in that trust account that they're unable to access because they cannot get coordination between the band members. Is that something that you see happen more often? Is it something that's happened? Like, I'm not sure how it works in northern Manitoba. Is there an agreement for the electrical power? I was up in northern Quebec. They have the James Bay Agreement. There's this funding mechanism that happens through the power generation. Is there anything like that in northern Manitoba?
No, not in northern Manitoba. Maybe in Nelson.
Is there?
There's partnerships in Nelson House, for example, but they're not. There's not a trust fund.
Yeah,
set up like
one of the troubles that comes with the trust funds is that they can't get agreement because it needs to, everything that goes through that trust fund has to go through a referendum, I guess, as to if all the band members are in agreement, or a majority of the band members are in agreement, then they can spend that money on particular things. Is there an opportunity to perhaps put that money directly in the hands of every First Nation member and then tax it upwards?
I'm sure there is. I mean, I don't know details of how agreements and how the trust funds work. I'm sure they're different to every community.
Yeah.
But for sure, the more we can streamline the policies that affect that, I mean, the better, because that just goes back to the same thing that you're holding back resources. How much underspending did the previous government do with our First Nations, yet we're suffering the most?
Well, how we end up in this, so we had the ministry here last meeting, and they were saying that there's a number of triggers that put a First Nation into third-party management. I was just wondering, and a lot of times they say if it was anywhere else in Canada, rather than spend the funding for services through one company or organization, if we run into trouble with them, we can move and we can go to another organization. But when you're at a remote First Nation, there is only one organization that's providing those services, and we have no other options but to come and help them out with the financial management of it. Is there an opportunity perhaps to circumvent the organization, put the money directly in the hands of the people, the individuals that live on that First Nation, and then tax it upwards, thereby creating more accountability to their own people?
Well, for sure, I think we can look at everything like that, but at the same time, we also have to remember that you're talking about people that are not used to that yet. Like the power to control and manage their own resources has been taken away from them, and they can manage their own families and that, but that's a huge responsibility to just plunk it into the families themselves, because they're going to need capacity building, and we don't provide enough capacity building in our First Nations for education and even financial literacy. When we get to the cities, new Canadians and new immigrants usually come, well, not usually, but sometimes they come with money ahead of time. But we don't have that luxury when we go to the city. We don't have even references sometimes to get apartments, and so there's always a lack there already with financial literacy and financial opportunity to support them and sustain themselves. So to put that on them automatically is not going to be helpful. But at the same time, I know that there has to be a way we have to do that, because as we go along, it's not working. It's crippling everyone, and the sooner that we start to change these policies, the better the rest of us will be.
For sure.
Minute.
Thank you. I guess where I'm trying to go with this is that the financial transparency is something that all Canadians have a right to, and we'd like to see that, especially or in addition to on our First Nations. We need some way to get to have that accountability within the First Nation, and I know that Duncan First Nation riding, or one in my riding, the chief was just elected on a transparency mandate. Could you just maybe comment on the transparency and how that is seen in Manitoba?
Well, I know that where our communities are the most, I guess they report the most, but yet at the same time they're not given the resources to do that even. And in terms of the connectivity and reporting that way, the way everyone is used to reporting now, going online and doing their financial paperwork on there. So that's already an issue there. But at the same time, I know a lot of First Nations that are accountable to their communities. They open their books to their communities, and they have regular meetings. It's not across the board, but that also has to do with, again, capacity building and also the change in leadership that constantly happens in our communities. So there's rarely any consistency in some of the communities.
Thank you.
Questioning now moves to MP Romeo Saganach.
Miigwech, nistum kan skum gabas tuksin, kan skumin get is bedang stiumon, that statement ge, nastawan decision e betalang ge inuimen nistum, if it's been with miigwech mak ge didn't. There are a lot of questions that I want to ask following your presentation, but I want to start off with your statement that when you said that if we are serious about reconciliation, then we need to look seriously at the report of the TRC and the calls to action. I know that in the 94 calls to action, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is referred to at least 16 times, I think, in the calls to action, including the two fundamental ones that are under the heading Reconciliation, Call to Action 43 and 44, which calls on the governments, Government of Canada, provinces, territories, and municipalities to fully adopt and implement the UN Declaration as the framework for reconciliation. That's an important recommendation, I believe. Do you think that in undertaking this task that we have here, reviewing this policy, that we need that framework as well?
Absolutely. I think it spells it out quite clearly and easily when you look at UNDRIP and the calls to action, that it calls for mutual respect and even collaboration to work with our First Nations to start to address a lot of these policies that negatively impact our communities. And I think it's long overdue that we start implementing them, because our people are suffering every day under these policies, and it's not getting any better. And I think the sooner we start to look at that and stop talking about reconciliation and start doing it. I think when we're talking to international communities like I did last week, they were under the assumption that we were well on our way and that everything is, people have the assumption that in Canada we're doing really well to our First Nations, but and it might seem that way in some fronts, but at the same time, when you go and live in our communities, we feel the crippling poverty, and we feel the disparaging health realities in our communities, and it's because of these policies, and we have it all spelled out in UNDRIP and TRC, paid for by this government to look at these policies and recommendations, and yet they're not implementing them in a lot of ways. And you know, I don't know how anyone can go to sleep at night knowing that they're responsible for First Nations suffering in our communities, in our own country, which is the most wealthiest, one of the wealthiest in this world, and we still have this abject poverty that we go home to.
Although this committee is studying the default prevention and management policy, even when a community comes out of a third-party management, they still remain under a colonial structure called the Indian Act. So I know that many of the issues that we face, or the challenges that we face in our communities, have been neglected for so long by successive federal governments that they all have become priorities. So do you think, beyond this study on this particular policy, do you have any recommendations as to how we should move forward from here?
Well, I know a lot of people are calling out to abolish the Indian Act, and I think that is the right way to go as we move forward. But I also know that we have to have a process designed by our First Nations and incredibly talented and intelligent people like yourself who's participated in the development of UNDRIP. And I think we have those experts in our own communities now that we can design and support that way forward, abolishing and moving away from the Indian Act, because it's not helping anyone in Canada the way it is set up.
Is there I know that there are many challenges, and you represent a lot of northern isolated communities. What are the challenges in that respect in terms of planning for those communities? I'm from northern Quebec, and we have to plan carefully for construction season, for instance. And a lot of times it's difficult to do that when you don't know how much money you're going to be getting. Do you face similar challenges in northern Manitoba?
Yes, for sure. And winter roads is just one of the areas that limits those opportunities, because when a First Nations finally gets approved for a certain number of housing, then they have to go quickly to find the materials, buy the materials, arrange for transportation, and that takes time. It doesn't take an instant, and also they often need bridge financing because they don't have reserved money in the bank to cover until the actual money comes through. So sometimes it hinders projects and delays them by 2 years or more until everything is up to date. And then a lot of times, sometimes even the housing that does get there, especially prefab homes, they're not appropriate. And so there's a lot of wasted efforts too in some companies that deal with our First Nations, who are not always on the up and up in providing the service that they say they are. And then it's the First Nations that suffer. I know that there are some houses in one of our communities that are sitting empty, beautiful inside, but they're useless because the company that sold it to them wasn't being truthful on the rates or the way that the houses were built.
So do you think that a future policy, an approved policy, whatever, will need to take into consideration specific circumstances of the North?
Absolutely. There are so many challenges in our North, and especially in the remote communities that the South will never understand. And that also has to do with capacity. Sometimes there's housing projects for a short season, and then people are trained up with their carpentry skills, and then by the next time they need them, their license has run out because they weren't able to practice their profession, so they have to go back to training in the first place, and then they have to do the training over and over again. Some people have done the same first level training 12 times in a row just to keep the jobs that they get every once in a while.
Questioning now moves to MP Don Rusnak.
So thank you, Grand Chief, for being here today. I've worked in your territory when back in a past life when I worked for the Manitoba government in Swampy Cree Tribal Council region and Norway House, a fantastic area with amazing people, and I was proud of the work that I did with the communities there. But one of my frustrations is, and something I've said before, is that our people have become beggars in our own land. And I got in trouble for saying that before. What I mean by that is that if you look at, and a lot of people talk about the treaties, in especially the number treated areas, that the intent of those treaties was to share the land. And I had a conversation not too long ago with Northern Nain communities about jurisdiction and how we rely as First Nation communities on a department that premises itself on a piece of legislation that was designed to destroy and control our communities. And that's what we're studying here right now, still that piece of legislation and improving it. And I understand that we can't, some communities can't jump full force into taking over jurisdiction over a lot of things. But what do you see for Northern Manitoba First Nations taking over pieces of responsibility, and I view it as incremental to getting rid of the Indian Act, and I don't view it as an Indigenous person the responsibility of the federal government to make those changes. I think those need to be driven by Indigenous communities, and the federal government needs to listen. But what do you see as the future going forward for Northern Manitoba and the communities there?
I think one of the biggest hopes I have is that we're, as Indigenous people, getting into all different facets of society, and one of them is the Aboriginal Financing Officer. It's an organization, I think it's called AFO. And I know in Swampy Cree there are some members from there that are part of this AFO, and they're very capable and very intelligent to deal with finances. And so I think we just need more capacity building on that level and management level to start to address a lot of the concerns that even our communities have in how we manage our finances. And I think we take it for granted that we assume that every chief should know how to finance and manage their books. But chiefs are chiefs, and they're elected to lead the community. They're not necessarily elected to run the books. But I think we give that false hope in that, because we're, it's a racist policy. We think that we should control everything that the chief does, and that they're responsible for everything that the community is responsible for. But really, we need a lot of help in our communities and capacity building. Like any municipal city is important to build that capacity at all levels, and including the financial area and management, and even we're now in a new age where I know that a lot of people want to go back to the old ways and start living off the land, and I commend people that want to do that and want to live that way. But at the same time, there are lots of other people that want to look forward and build their communities to in a modern, current way. But there's ways that it can do that is still respectful to our First Nations, and I think a lot of people are already thinking that way. And you'll see a lot of one of our communities are actually managed very well, and we don't hear enough about those. And the ones that manage their communities and affairs very well are the ones that are able to have consistent leadership in their communities. And we don't see enough of that. The communities that are suffering the most, I believe, are the ones impacted directly by the Indian Act, with the short-term election and terms that they're living under. And by the time they get their footing and understand all the requirements of running a community as a chief, it's time for them to go, and then someone else has to start all over again. And that's a policy of the Indian Act that talks about when the election should be run, and it's, you know, unfortunately, it was built that way to fail, and I think we need to change that. And I know that there's some communities that are going into 4-year terms now, and that's going to help a lot. But we need to do that across the board and start looking at the policies that are not helping.
1 minute. So quickly, because we're on a timer, the conversation I had with Northern Ontario First Nations regarding jurisdiction, do you see anything for Northern Manitoba First Nations to kind of bite off in terms of jurisdiction, perhaps with the provinces and the federal government, to start having those discussions, for example, healthcare or natural resources? And natural resources was one of the topics, a shared jurisdiction that I had with the NAN communities. And actually, instead of impact benefit agreements, which I look at as modern beads and trinkets, a real conversation about jurisdiction and sharing the land and sharing the revenue off the land.
Absolutely. I think we need to transform the whole way we deal with transferring dollars. And I don't even like saying transferring dollars, because it's money that rightfully belongs to the First Nations and the people themselves. And we need to completely transform the way, for example, we conduct healthcare. And I'm working with NAN and FSIN to come up with a plan called the Indigenous Health Alliance, and it talks about that, about completely turning the way we deliver health programs and giving the transparency and the accountability to the people themselves. So we are the ones in our communities that list the priorities and the areas that we need to be focused on, and then go from the inside out. So we're managing where that accountability comes from, because as it is right now, health providers and even researchers, they're accountable to the government. They want to please the government, then they report to the government. They don't report to our people who they study, and it doesn't give them any reason to make sure that the people on reserve are okay, because they just want to follow the requirements and fill the requirements needed by the government, and the government doesn't always have the best intentions for it.
Thank you, Chair.
Questioning is going to MP Kathy McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Grand Chief, for joining us today. My first comment is I do agree that we need to find a much more appropriate way to, share the resources of the land, to provide to ensure that it's appropriately done and fairly done, and provides a lot more opportunity in communities. I know in British Columbia there's many sort of movements in that direction. So I think that is important, and maybe that's not directly related to the conversation, but will ultimately be part of where we go. But I do have a concern. I know you talked about take away the strings. We do need to find ways to ensure accountability while we take away the strings. And I note that the audit prior to your leadership with MKO, there were some very concerning issues in terms of, money that was intended for childcare not reaching the communities. You talked about not having support for skills training, and became clear from that particular audit that there was some money intended for skills training that didn't see its way into the community. So I guess I'd like you to maybe focus in on there's many good people out there who do good things, and whether it's senators or MPs or business owners or sometimes employees, we need to have checks and balances to make sure that that there's checks and balances in terms of monies and systems. So if you want to take away the strings, how do you ensure the proper checks and balances? Because, I mean, it breaks my heart to know that there was childcare funds that didn't go towards childcare.
Well, again, I think I reiterate what I said to Dawn about putting the accountability back to the people themselves. And I can't really speak on the intention of what actually happened with the previous Grand Chief in our region, because I simply don't know, and I don't understand the logic completely. But I can also see, you know, when we talk about those cuts, those deep cuts that happened in 2012 and 13, I believe they also had a lot to do with it, because communities and organizations were forced to look at their priorities and the current projects that they were working on, and had to make decisions based on that. And like I say, at the band level, that happens all the time, where there's little resources to go around in the first place, and they're forced to move pockets of the little money that they have to cover, you know, something that's come up in the communities. And so
So I appreciate that. You know, certainly as I read through the audit, there was some concerns that were perhaps a little bit bigger than, you know, having to decide between food and shelter. But so my big concern, and I think I've been spoken about it regularly, and I agree that transparency has to be available to the communities, because if there's funding for childcare or if there's funding for lunch programs, detailed reporting, it's the community members that are going to be able to hold their chiefs and councils to account. And it really, I'm getting more and more community members who are calling very, very concerned. Obviously, the chiefs did not like the First Nations Transparency Act, but we're now 18 months and we have a really haphazard approach to giving information to community members, and there's an increasing concern. So could you talk about, are you putting pressure on that you can put in terms of saying we have to have a system in place that's going to be accountable to our community members? Because to me that's a really important step.
I think the end of the day, we need to understand that our responsibility and our accountability does need to go to our First Nations, and I know a lot of people realize that and want that as well, and it's not lost on us. But at the same time, it is a process, because even the government policies themselves don't always follow up on their own policies. They let things lapse, and they let things you know, go without proper checks and balances themselves, and then they put it on the First Nations as the ones that did the mismanagement. And I've seen that and heard of those situations more often than not, but it's always the First Nations that look like they're the ones that are at a default, whereas, you know, government officials and bureaucrats haven't followed up on their own to do the due diligence and the work that they're required to do.
Questioning now moves to MP Remy Massé.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here with us this morning. I'll give you the time to find your earpiece. Great. Thank you for being with us this morning. I know that it takes time to prepare for this kind of committee to take part in our work here. Earlier, you mentioned the policy that was implemented in 2011 and the impacts that it had. Have you seen any changes in the government's culture in terms of managing financing agreements with the various governments in Northern Manitoba, for example? Have you seen a change in culture since our government came to power? Have you seen more openness for holding discussions, establishing mechanisms that would promote better agreements to ensure that funding is provided more effectively and in a more targeted way?
And you're talking about the Liberal government, right?
Well, our government.
Okay. I would say that abisis ndobatene how minubanik translate that. I see a little bit of changes. At least the willingness, it sounds like, is there, but at the same time, we're not seeing a lot of evidence of that talk. And I think there is a level of respect for our First Nations. I can say that from this government, from the previous one, especially from the previous government. But I think anything compared to the previous government looks a little better the next day. But I can definitely say that there is a level of respect and at least willingness to collaborate now. But I think we need to see more, and we need to see action, and we need to see real commitments and better, management of the spending that didn't happen. We need to start to address that. Why was that money held back in the first place, and yet our communities are still suffering and in extreme poverty and lack of resources. So I think the willingness is there. We need to bring it out more and see real commitments, and I hope this budget will have, and I mean, I don't have a lot of hope in the budget. I don't know if anyone ever really does. I'm always cautiously optimistic. I always have to look forward, but at the same time, we're so used to lack, and we're so used to false promises that it's hard to completely jump in and celebrate a lot of the decisions made at this level.
Dans les réponses que vous avez
In the responses you provided and in your opening remarks, you mentioned many infrastructure projects, for example, for clean water, for housing. Are there still many challenges left in the 30 communities that are under your organization? And I'm asking this question because I'd like to know what the mechanism is that would help provide funding for significant infrastructure projects. I mean, what's the mechanism there? There's a crying need for funding. You need funding. What is the mechanism that would allow for the significant funding to be put in place for these infrastructure projects, for example, for clean water or for housing?
Well, I think we need people that have, engineering and economics degrees to figure out the mechanisms themselves. But I can tell you that in my communities, some communities are short by 500 houses, some are 1,500 houses, just to catch up to the waiting list in our communities. So that gives you a reflection of the high needs in our reserves. Some places, there's 3 generations in one 3-bedroom house in some of our communities, and the house is deplorable in the first place, with poor insulation and windows. And what happens is that people end up getting sick, and it raises up the cost of health care in our communities, and it even puts people in danger. And last Christmas, I had to deal with a house fire in my own community of 3 people that died. And they were living in a house that was so old. It was there when I was a teenager, and it was already really old back then. But the family that lived there moved to a different house, but there was just not enough room in that house. They had to live in that old house too. So they couldn't completely abandon the old house because they needed this space. And so they died in that house because there was no maintenance of proper ventilation system, and the wood stove that they relied on collapsed, and then that's how they died. So we definitely need a mechanism and a better plan to build more housing in our communities, for example, and even schools and hospitals. Some communities are also even dealing with the simple things of expanding their boundary of their community. For example, in War Lake, they've been asking the government to expand their territory so they can build more housing, so they can bring more people home. But they don't have the land capacity to build any more houses, so people are forced to live in other urban centers and suffering over there instead of wanting to be at home in their own community. So there's many factors.
We're going to move questioning to David Yurdega.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us this morning. My understanding is that MKO eventually wants to dismantle Indigenous and Northern Affairs Department and repeal or amend the Indian Act and transfer government programs related to funding directly to Manitoba First Nations. So my question is, do you believe this will reduce the number of First Nations communities under third-party management?
Sorry, can you say that last part?
Do you believe this will reduce the number of First Nation communities under third-party management?
I think that's a bit of an odd question because the decision to put people in the third-party management is based on government policies, and you're talking about something else on the capacity part that seems to be lacking.
Yeah, I'll rephrase it. Like if we put more ownership upon First Nations with the funding, that would probably, in likelihood, reduce the number of First Nation communities under third-party management.
Yeah, I think that the more that we build capacity and accountability back to our First Nations is better. And I think, as I've said before, we've operated and lived under our own laws and our own leadership for thousands of years before colonization came to be, and we managed to survive. And I think that we forget that in the short time that we've been a nation called Canada. And I think we have to go back to some of the laws that our elders and our First Nations already live by, but are not allowed to operate under because of the Indian Act and the other policies that govern our First Nations.
Okay, thank you. You know, from my experience, some communities are more successful than the others, but it seems that the more isolated the community is, the bigger the challenges. So is there a differential in funding? Obviously, the further north and more isolated, is there more money allotted for those conditions? Because we see one community that's doing very well, and then you see another community that's isolated that's not doing as well, or doing very poorly. So, like, you look at the cost of getting products in, you're looking at cost of everything goes up. So, is there any mechanism through INAC that compensates for that differential?
No, on the most part, no. But I know that there are sometimes what's called Northern Post Allowance for federal workers and others that get extra funding to buy the expensive food in our isolated communities. So when they're sent up there as teachers or other professions, they get a little bit more money for that to work. And the other thing I know about is the Nutrition North program that subsidizes supposedly some food, but most of those subsidies end up going to the Northwest Company that are being subsidized to deliver the food there. But it doesn't always reach the First Nations and the people themselves because the subsidy is eaten up by the company themselves to cover their expenses they have to deliver that food. And it is expensive to deliver food there. That's not I don't doubt that, but there's also other ways we can use the Nutrition North money, including helping build gardens and greenhouses so the people in the communities themselves can grow their own food and subsidize that way, but also subsidize country foods because that's what people relied on before and made them healthy. Unfortunately, in Shamattawa, for example, when the northern store there burnt down a few months ago, it crippled the community because it also, what we saw was that the ability for people to sustain themselves off the land was taken away slowly and surely, and we're left relying on Western-based grocery stores to sustain us. And when that's taken away, it harms the community. And I think in the long term, if it had extended, I think our people would have figured it out and they would have been okay. But at the same time, I know that that's not always possible with every community, because as much as we think it's an easy fix to go live off the land, it takes money to go live off the land, and resources, and even the skills that were there before are lacking, because our young people are not engaged as much as our previous generations in that kind of lifestyle. So there's many things that have changed and are hurting our communities in those kind of ways.
Thank you.
Questioning goes to MP Ananda Sangari.
Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to just pick up on an earlier point with respect to resource development and kind of sharing of some of the projects that are taking place in northern Manitoba. Can you give us some sense as to what opportunities are available, and if they are available, what kind of consultation and discussions are required in order to be a true partnership between the government as well as your particular community and other communities in northern Manitoba?
Well, it seems impossible now to say, but I think the provincial government should turn over Manitoba Hydro to our Northern First Nations to control and to implement policies that are based on the needs of First Nations. But that's not going to happen. But I think we're still trying to embark on those conversations to share the resources. Even though right now it looks impossible, we'll never stop going on that level. But also, there's different, for example, in my own community, there's discovery of diamonds, supposedly, and that still has to be proven. That's still ways away. And our community, a lot of people in our community are very excited about the possibility. A lot of people are also very skeptical, saying that they're going to ruin our community and our land. And the area that the diamonds are supposedly in is a beautiful, beautiful lake. And I can understand why some people are against resource development solely on that, because the fishing there is incredible. But at the same time, I think there is ways that we can do really proper and true duty to consult with our First Nations, so our elders and our people can help manage a way forward to extract resources that would benefit the region first, and then benefit everybody else.
Thank you. You discussed extensively about capacity building. And I think with respect to third-party management, what are the specific issues where I think the department or even third parties can assist in building local capacity?
Well, first of all, I think we have to understand what jobs there are in our communities, because it's a myth that there are no jobs in our communities, because there are. But the ones that are there are ones that need post-secondary education. And we're starting off, when we leave our communities to go to post-secondary education, usually 2 grades behind. I know that for sure, because when I went from grade 9 to grade 10 and from Oxford House to Winnipeg, I was 2 grades behind, and I was one of the smartest kids in the whole school, I'll say, when I was in Oxford House, and the dumbest kid when I got to Winnipeg. And I don't understand how some people actually make it. It's sheer perseverance that people make it through post-secondary education when they come from our communities to universities and colleges, because it's hard at first, and let alone the culture shock and all of the things that you need to get used to when you move to the city, but the education level. So we have to start looking at education systems in our communities to build those capacities that we need to have a high-functioning community. And I think we have lots of examples of that. I know some communities recruit based on the needs in their communities, but we need more of that. We need, in one of our communities, a health center is going up in the next few years, and why can't we decide on what jobs we need and start recruiting for those jobs already and start creating training programs for that. I think one of the things that I talked about when I was talking about our issue around missing and murdered women, a reporter asked me, do we need more counseling and safe houses and stuff? I said, for sure, but we also need jobs to take care of our own selves and take care of our own families, because what happens is we become dependent on other places and other people that don't have the best interest of our people, and that's just a microcosm of what's actually happening in our communities. And so when we're dependent on other forms and other governments and policies and places that don't have our best interests, we suffer, and until we change that, we're going to keep suffering.
That's the round. The final round of questioning goes to MP Romeo Saganash.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to start by saying that I agree that with this new government, the tone has changed. But at times, when you look at them, especially with the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, that attitude is not compatible or consistent with reconciliation in my mind. Rather than challenging the authority of the tribunal, they should tell us whether or not they will end the discrimination against First Nations against. So those are the kind of issues that we continue to confront. There's recently a ministerial committee that was formed by this new government, and they're supposed to review legislative and policy for the future. And if you had the opportunity to determine the agenda of that committee, what would it be?
Excuse me. Well, for sure, I would infuse it with Indigenous thinkers on that committee and start honoring that perspective, because that's what's always been missing in these policies and creation of these committees. But I think you're right. We have a lot of good lip service from this government and even INAC in a lot of ways, but we have yet to see the real improvements that our communities need. And I think we need to start putting that onus and start talking about it, about what actually the needs are, and start creating environments that are conducive to that. And I think even in our own province, our INAC office is so inaccessible right now that it's hard to even for our people to go and have that relationship that's supposedly improving. And I can say that it has improved in some ways, but at the same time, there is still a lot of work to do, and we need to move that way, because as it is, we're suffering, and it's not getting any better. And I think that the more that we talk about it openly, and the more that we really look at the challenges together, and also bring the onus back into our First Nations, I think we have to do that. We don't have any choice anymore, because we're going into a new era of hope and opportunity. But at the same time, it's not going to go with us if we're not working together. And a friend of mine and a colleague from Alberta says that 150 years ago we were meant to be extinct, and that's what happened. And that's what created us where we are today. But 150 years later, we're still here, and we're in all facets of society. We're everywhere. We're not as much as we want to be in an entry level that builds capacity for our young people, but we're still everywhere. You're still here, and a lot of First Nations are in every level. And in 150 years, who knows where we'll be if we keep moving the way we are. And I think that's the great hope that I have.
In order to meet some of the challenges, and there are a lot, housing is one of them. Even in the previous study that we did on suicide prevention in communities, housing was an issue that kept coming back all the time. So there are a lot of challenges like that. What kind of hope do you have with this next budget coming up tomorrow?
Answer one word very quickly.
Cautiously optimistic, but not very hopeful. It'll never meet the challenges that are there right at this very second. And that is endangering people's lives in this country.
Thank you. Thank you very much for participating. I appreciate that you've had a recent accident, you've broken your arm. It made it even more difficult to come out, so our appreciation for going that extra mile, many miles from where your homelands are, in fact. And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be in camera. So I'm suspending the meeting for about 5 minutes until we reconvene in camera for business.
you.